Images of Islam: mysterious, exotic, sometimes frightening, but always alien, different. There is truth in these images, but they are incomplete. Beyond the eeriness of the sounds and beneath the foreignness of the robes lives a religion that's thriving in the United States. Islam in America. If you were asked to find the Muslims in this international gathering, and if you shared the stereotypes of many Americans, you might look for people who matched your idea of an Arab. And so you'd be surprised that everyone in this gathering in Quincy, Massachusetts, is a Muslim.
You have nationalities from all over the world. We have them from the Middle East to Africa to China to the Barbados, Trinidad, South America, anywhere that you can think of. Kenya, I met some brothers today from Kenya. I mean, there's no limit.
There are 1 billion Muslims in the world today, making Islam second only to Christianity in size. It's no surprise that most Arabs are Muslims, but most Muslims are not Arabs. In fact, 4 out of 5 are not. The largest Islamic populations are in Indonesia and Pakistan. In China, in India, and in parts of what used to be the Soviet Union, Muslims are a prominent minority. And Muslim populations are growing in Western Europe and in North America. Yet the Arabian city of Mecca and the Arabic language are sacred to Muslims all over the world. Because Mecca is where Muslims believe God spoke to the Prophet Muhammad. And Muslims believe their holy book, the Quran, is an exact record of the actual word of God. Muhammad began preaching about Islam, which means submission to the will of God, in the 7th century. In his lifetime, Islam spread across the Arabian Peninsula. By the 10th century, through a combination of military conquest and voluntary conversion, Islam was practiced from Spain to the frontiers of India. In the West, Islam is often referred to as the religion of the sword. In tales of the Crusades, the Muslims are always the heathens. But for Muslims, it was the Christians who were the invaders and the infidels.
I have any kind of prejudice myself. I know other people have, but people are more aware of what Islam is. They want to know, is everybody like that from what we hear on the news? And, you know, it's our job to show them that you can be Muslim and not be, you know, a fanatic. Because there are people, there are Christian fanatics, there are Jewish fanatics. You show them, by living here in America, we can show them that they're, you know, what the real Islam is.
And remember that Abraham was tried by his Lord with certain commands, which he fulfilled.
There have been Muslims in America for many years. According to some scholars, 1 in 10 of the slaves brought from West Africa was a Muslim. The religion did not survive in slave times, but in recent years, American blacks have once again been attracted to Islam.
How many prayers a day?
5.
5 prayers.
Of course, there is not one kind of Islam in the United States, just as there is not one kind of Christianity. There's an immense range. The Ayatollah Khomeini no more represents all of Islam than Jimmy Swaggart represents all of Christianity. Yet for all the diversity, there are 5 things that all practicing Muslims have in common. Muslims call these the 5 pillars of Islam. Whether they're in Indiana or Indonesia, for instance, devout Muslims pray 5 times a day. Producer Lindsay Miller traveled around the United States to see how the 5 pillars are practiced in 5 American cities. She found that in the United States in the 1990s, Islam is not just in the news, It's in the neighborhood as well. Driveway basketball on a summer weekend in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. In all of Middle America, there's nothing quite so ordinary. What is not quite ordinary about the Igram family is that they are Muslim. And so they go to Cedar Rapids Mosque for Friday prayer. Friday is the Muslim Sabbath. Nobody knows for sure how many Muslims there are in the United States. At least 3 million, possibly 6 million, and growing. There are already more Muslims than Episcopalians. By the turn of the century, there could be more Muslims than Jews in this country. Like many Muslims in the American Middle West, the Igram family has its roots in the Arab Middle East. The first Igram came to Iowa in 1922 from the Syrian province that is now Lebanon. Later arrivals have kept the old traditions intact. Grandmother Haji Ratibi is making a search for the most tender grape leaves on the vine in the backyard.
She burned them. She was the other day for me and her. And she burned the water.
Cousins have come from Canada to help stuff the grape leaves and to celebrate the wedding of Lila Igram and Tarek Ossi, descendants of two of the oldest Muslim families in Iowa.
Well, actually, the first mosque in the United States was built in Cedar Rapids. The first two mosques, one was in Cedar Rapids and one was in Michigan. So the community has a very strong base.
The groom's grandfather came to stay. He not only helped build the first mosque in America, he built the first Muslim cemetery. Albert Ossi is an uncle of the groom and one of the family historians.
This grave here is my father.
He said his father came to the United States in search of a better life. But why did he come here? Why Iowa? Well, because factories paid $5 a day, and even then there were other Arabs here.
So when he arrived in New York with a little sticker on his chest that said Fort Dodge, Iowa, he got there. My grandfather said the first thing you need to do is go out and learn how to work. At 12, 13 years old, he put him on a farm. And when he was on this farm, he was, after about 3 months, he thought, boy, I can speak. And they were good people, and they took care of him. And he went to town, only to find now that he was living with a German family, and he could speak Arabic and German.
He soon learned English as well, and like many Arab immigrants, he started peddling groceries door to door.
This is a picture of my father after he graduated from carrying a suitcase and walking to a team of horses. This is the graduation to the motor vehicle, and that's why that content, proud look on his face.
By 1934, the Muslims of Cedar Rapids had built their first mosque.
It all begins here in this building where the community gathered together to purchase this building and to make it as a mosque with a dome and a little minaret.
Taha Tawil is leading a campaign to restore that first mosque and have it declared an historic landmark. Bill Johnson lives nearby.
Yeah, I'm glad to see him do something with it because it was getting kind of run down there for a while.
Yeah, and it's costly.
Did the Muslims get along with everybody else in the neighborhood?
Well, Cedar Rapids has always been a mixed town. I mean, every race, creed, color, and religion, but they always got along good together. Well, you had a few people that were, you know how they always are, but you're going to find that everywhere you go.
Exactly.
The new Islamic Center was built in 1972. Children whose great-grandparents helped establish America's first mosque are learning to read and pray in Arabic.
Who can tell him about 5 pillars of Islam?
Carefully and patiently, their teachers drill them in the 5 pillars of Islam. These are the basic requirements of faith for Muslims anywhere in the world.
You have to do the 5 pillars of Islam, which are believe in one God and Muhammad is his messenger. and to fast fast for the month of Ramadan, and Hajj, and zakat, give charity, and is there one more? Pray 5 times a day.
Of all the pillars, the most important is the first, Shahada, the declaration of faith.
La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. I bear witness there's only one God, Prophet Muhammad is his messenger.
There is no such thing, Muslims say, as a Mohammedan.
Like my friends say, they ask me, is Muhammad related to Allah and stuff? And I just say no.
They explain Allah is simply the Arabic word for God.
God is like the same person, but we call him Allah.
And they do not worship Muhammad.
We said Muhammad was just a regular man. I mean, he was like our teacher. I mean, he's not like somebody like the specialist person in the world. He's not. It's not like he's God, but he was chosen to be one of the prophets of God. He was born 570, and he got married when he was 25, and he became prophet when he was 40, and he died when he was 63.
Muslims, like Christians and Jews, trace their roots to Abraham. And they believe Moses and Jesus were holy men, prophets, sent by God to teach people how to live. But for Muslims, the final revelation came to Muhammad in the words of the Holy Quran. The Quran speaks about practical as well as spiritual matters. It lays down strict dietary laws, for instance. No pork, no alcohol. All Muslims are required to pray 5 times a day, but only on Fridays are Muslim men required to go to a mosque to pray.
I try to go to the mosque 5 times a day for prayer, and usually I do.
Tarek and Lila were not always so observant.
I went through a period where I really got involved in American society and culture. So I really, I strayed away from my beliefs.
You mean rock and roll? And...
Yeah, just typical high school life. Whatever there is to it, I was part of it.
It was at the University of Iowa that they met more conservative Muslims from other countries. The experience was a revelation.
I just took a complete U-turn and started changing and started being more conscious, started being more productive, and same with Tarek.
I offer you Tarek Aussie in marriage to Laila Ajram, according to the book of Allah.
And they decided to get married. The actual wedding was a private ceremony last fall, but for their families, they had another ceremony and reception with all the trimmings. The bride wore a traditional Western wedding dress. When the time came to pray, she just exchanged one veil for another. The band played music from the Middle East to celebrate a wedding in the Middle West. In Muslim countries, this is the wake-up service. And for most Americans abroad, a reminder of how far from home they are. The Muslim call to prayer comes 5 times a day. Before dawn, twice during daylight, at sunset, and again late at night. In Muslim countries, it's blared from speakers atop minarets. Here in Los Angeles and in most Muslim communities in the United States, the call is rarely broadcast in public. But 5 times a day, the faithful respond. This picture is almost a visual cliché. It is seen so often. Prayer may be the most seen, least understood aspect of Islam. The call to prayer is not always loud and clear. Sometimes it's whispered. Isa Alsop made sure the call was one of the first things his firstborn heard.
I just took her in my arms and I called the azan in her right ear.
There in a hospital in Northridge, California, he spoke in Arabic phrases he hopes she will hear all her life.
God is great, God is great. There is no God but God. Muhammad is a messenger of God. Come to prayer, come to prayer. Come to success, come to success. God is great, God is great. There's no God but God.
Have skirts and skirts, and Miss Anya will help the 3-year-olds, the preschoolers.
Muslim children are not required to pray until they are 7 years old. But at the Islamic Center of Southern California, they learn how to pray in kindergarten. The children here reflect the diversity of the Muslim community of Los Angeles. Their parents are Pakistanis, Egyptians, Turks, Iranians, and American converts.
Arms up.
Prayer is the second of the 5 pillars of Islam. It is called Salat and is part of daily life for devout Muslims the world over. Every detail for prayer is spelled out in the Muslim holy book, the Quran. It says girls and women must dress modestly. Conservatives interpret that to mean cover up, except for faces, hands, and feet. Everyone must remove shoes to show respect. The prayer is always in Arabic. Grown-ups say some parts aloud and some parts to themselves. The children say everything out loud to keep track of the repetitions. Today, the imam or prayer leader is Nader Burpee. He is 6, and he has mastered the routine.
You put your hands on your tummy, then you go down to do ruku, and then you come back up, and then you go down on your knees.
This is the way we wash our right foot, wash our right foot, wash our right foot. This is the way we wash our right foot 3 times for making wudu.
Wudu is the ritual washing that all Muslims are supposed to do before they pray.
The way we wash our face 3 times for making
Ceremonial washing, like much of Muslim ritual, has echoes in other faiths. Muslims are not required to pray in a particular place. They don't have to go to a mosque. But they must pray facing Mecca, the city in Saudi Arabia that houses the Kaaba, or a central shrine of Islam. And why bend and bow down? Why not kneel or stand in one place? There's a reason, says Asya Mansouri.
Well, you do that to show that you're like lower, like you're the lowest, and God's like the highest.
At First Avenue Junior High in Arcadia, California, Asya was the only Muslim in the 7th grade, the only person covering her hair. By the end of the year, she said, no one even seemed to notice. Once, while doing her homework, she laughed out loud at her world history book. Her father, Jabir Mansouri, wondered why.
She said, well, look at this. This is describing how we pray. And I said, how does it describe? And so she read the paragraph. And it said, Muslim Bedouin. These Bedouins slap their hands on the ground, get down on their knees, put their face in the sand, rub their face, and then they say prayer. And she thought it was ridiculous, so she thought it was funny.
Shabir Mansouri thought the history text was demeaning and wrong. He has organized a campaign to get more accurate and more balanced information about Islam into California textbooks.
It says in the sixth-grade textbook, Torah teaches us, Bible teaches us. When it comes to Quran, Muhammad claimed, or Muslims claim, if you're going to have a standard, have the same standard for all religion. Do not make this religion ours and that religion theirs.
Stand by. Rolling.
The Kaaba is the physical and spiritual axis of the world, according to Muslims.
The Islamic Center of Southern California has a weekly show on cable television with Nancy Leidick as host. She grew up Episcopalian in Texas and converted to Islam 10 years ago. In addition to this volunteer job, she is a psychologist and college administrator. And she prays 5 times a day, starting before dawn.
Many times people get up at this hour to jog and, and don't think anything of it. It feels good to jog in the crispness of the early morning, just at dawn, at sunrise. But they think of getting up to pray as something that is a burden. And actually, it's a lovely way to start the day.
So here we are at work. How would you manage to pray? What are you going to do today?
At 11:30, which is not too far away, I will get up and take my prayer rug and run down to the computer room and run in and pray.
Ignoring the distractions of fast-lane Los Angeles, she repeats the ancient ritual. She says for her, this is not just going through the motions. It's a chance to stop everything else and remember God. She says it puts things in perspective. It's preferable to pray at the specified time, but the Quran says it's okay to make up for a missed prayer later. The only time men are required to come to the mosque is on Fridays at midday. Women can pray in the mosque too, but, Muhammad said, men and women should pray separately so they won't distract each other.
It makes absolutely no difference to me where I stand when I pray, except that, in a sense, the separation allows me to focus on my prayer rather than on who's sitting next to me or is my dress coming up when I kneel. I do find it, as a woman, sometimes frustrating when I attend a masjid or a mosque where the women are put in the basement or put someplace totally different. I don't think that's necessary.
But prayer, she says, is necessary.
Every Muslim at that time of day is kneeling and praying to God using the same prayer and facing in the same direction. It's a beautiful symbol of oneness.
Yet from the outside, it is also a disturbing visual symbol of religious militancy, with inevitable echoes of televised radicalism that have little to do with Islam in America. The Darrington unit of the Texas Department of Correction is a maximum security prison near Houston. For years, it was notorious, even among Texas prisons, for the violence within its walls. In 1985, in just 5 months, 5 inmates were killed by other inmates. Times have changed at Darrington. There's a new warden and new rules. No longer are some inmates put in charge of others. On a sweltering day, this can be a nightmarish place. From the factory where old tires are recapped, to the living quarters known as the tanks.
This is home. Temporary.
The only quiet place is the chapel. where on Fridays at midday, Muslim prisoners gather for prayer. Every one of the inmates here today converted to Islam while in prison. There is a similar pattern at prisons around the country. Overall, the numbers are small. Out of 1,700 inmates at Darrington, 50 are Muslims. What is significant, says Warden Keith Price, is the difference that Islam seems to make in their lives.
All of a sudden, here was a minority inmate that was living in a system that very shortly before he'd been in combat against. Something made a difference. The only thing I could see that made a difference in those people's lives was the fact that they became Islamic.
The most famous prison convert was Malcolm X. He joined the Nation of Islam. But the Muslims at Darrington say there's a big difference between the black supremacy Malcolm advocated then and what they practice now.
Religion of all Islam is not about black, white, brown, or whatever, excuse me. It's a religion of all humanity.
The majority of American blacks who are Muslims today follow the universal teachings of Islam. That means they believe all races are equal before God. Even Malcolm X, at the end of his life, rejected the Nation of Islam idea that the white man is the devil and the black man God.
I don't see that picture of Islam at all now. In the 60s, but we're talking about, 3 decades later. I mean, that's not the picture of Islam that I see today.
Back then, Muslim prisoners were kept isolated at one penitentiary. Now there are Muslims throughout the Texas system, and also official Muslim chaplains.
Can I get the chaplain, please? He said he was...
Imam Eugene Farouk has a policy. He doesn't ask inmates what they're doing in a maximum security prison.
Sometimes if you find that might affect the way that you deal with that person, So to avoid even having to deal with that, in most cases I don't ask why they're there.
Like Muslims anywhere in the world, the inmates do a ritual washing before praying. The service proceeds as Friday prayer would anywhere in the world until it's time for the count.
As far as prison regulations go, when it's time to count, it's time to count. And everything stops for the count. So those are some of the things that that's one of the realities of prison.
Accept the realities of prison, Imam Farouk tells the inmates. Commit yourself to the discipline of Islam. And, he says, accept the support that comes from fellow Muslims. When Bazil Abdullah got out of prison, like many ex-offenders, he found it hard to get a job. So he formed his own company.
What do you call your company?
Dr. J Intensive Care, landscaping. I'm a doctor. That's right.
Now, he and other former inmates, all of them Muslims, have created a network of lawn care companies in Houston. Part of what they earn, they set aside for zakat. Zakat, or charity, is the third of the 5 pillars of Islam, the 5 practices common to Muslims the world over.
Most people say charity, but zakat, in our understanding, is broader than just feeding the hungry. Our understanding, the human being just don't need money. He needs guidance. That's the most important thing he needs, because you can have a whole lot of money and still be on crack.
In the neighborhood where Abdullah grew up, he found plenty of drugs and very little guidance. Now he and some of the other Muslims have gone back to the old neighborhood. With zakat money, they've bought an abandoned house.
Matter of fact, it was a crack house, you know, and we made it into a center, you know, for the worship of Allah. I was a heroin addict. I was on methadone, you know, pills, Christmas trees, nuggets as they call them, you know, tranquilizers. You know, I was doing all that, you know. And
is that how you landed in jail?
Yeah, I was involved in a murder.
He was 20 years old when he went to prison.
That was a turning point in my life, you know, and I don't regret, you know, I regret being in that situation where a person's life was taken, but I don't regret going, experiencing some of the things I experienced, you know, in that confinement or in that restricted area, because in that area I became a man, you know, and a free man, you know, thinking wise.
He became a Muslim in jail. He was released 9 years ago, and he has stayed straight. So has Najim Muqsin.
I've been out now for 8 years, and since all that time I haven't, you know, drunk no alcohol, I haven't smoked any marijuana, I haven't used any type drugs. I've been working hard.
It wasn't easy staying straight in prison.
A lot of the brothers in there that see you make the transition from gambling and being in that same world that they're in, and they see you leave that world, you know, like a crab in a bucket. You know, if one crab is trying to get out, the other one's gonna reach up and pull him back in. I need to get in the backyard. The gate is locked.
Do your clients know your history, or do they care?
I would say about 15 of my clients know of, you know, my going to jail. And they gave me keys to their gates and things like this. You know, Al-Islam, you know, changed my whole life. You know, my whole perspective of who I am and what I'm supposed to be. And, you know, I highly recommend it.
But are there always success stories? Imam Farouk says, of course not. Some people who convert in prison end up back in prison.
So becoming a Muslim in prison is not a magic charm.
No, it's not. It takes someone who's very sincere about turning his life around. By the same token, if you're able to deal with the reality of prison, once you get out, you can deal with the reality of the real world.
It takes a lot of discipline to be a Muslim, in prison or out. But even those in prison say it's Muslim discipline that has set them free. The hour before dinner. Many a family knows it as the crazy hour. Hind Ayubi seems an oasis of calm, even with 5 daughters and 1 daughter's friend underfoot.
Where is Daddy? He's late.
Daddy's late, company's coming, and it's almost time to eat. This is no ordinary dinner. In fact, it's a breakfast. It's breaking the fast at the end of a day of absolutely no food and no water since sunup. Fasting during the month of Ramadan is the 4th pillar or requirement of Islam. Muslims believe it was during Ramadan that Allah first revealed the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad.
Her teacher asked me, is he fasting? I said, no, she's still too young, but she's fasting between the meals.
During Ramadan, every Muslim over the age of 7 can have no food or drink from sunrise to sunset.
In Morocco, they break the fast is 2.
We do.
That's a good idea. You know.
We do.
Talal Eid is the father of 5 girls. Like his wife, he grew up in Lebanon. He is now the imam, or spiritual leader, of the Islamic Center of New England in Quincy, Massachusetts.
لإيلاف قريش إيلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت.
Usually, Muslims are supposed to pray right at sunset. But during Ramadan, the rule is different. Muhammad said people can't concentrate if they're hungry. So he instructed, eat something first, then pray. But why do Muslims fast?
We don't do it to lose weight, you know. We don't do it because it sounds interesting. It's not an experiment. You do it for God. And that makes all the difference in the world. It's a commitment to God.
The first day or two is difficult because you're not used to it. But once you pass that sort of physical hump, it becomes a very, very spiritual experience. The fasting teaches you many things, to feel empathy for those who truly are in need, to be grateful for the food that you do have.
A lot of times people will say, well, I'm studying for an exam, you know, I have to take an exam, and how am I going to fast and take an exam? You know, all I can think about is food. Well, I think we have to just trust in Allah that we will be able to do this.
Mary Lahaj and Shima Khan both grew up in American culture. In recent years, each decided to return to her Muslim roots and wear a hijab, or head covering, in public.
Assalamu alaikum, Islamic Center, may I help you?
Zayda Hassan is the receptionist at the mosque. Like many women of her generation, she wears a head cover to pray, but not the rest of the time. Zayda lives a block away from the mosque, near the old Quincy shipyards.
I think you know everybody around here.
Well, you know, it was just not like the shipyard. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody used to come to our restaurant, and they knew us since we were little kids, and we grew up knowing the people, and it was just like a family relationship.
Her mother ran Ma's Lunch. She and her brothers and sisters sold newspapers outside the gates.
One of the original founders.
The neighborhood was mostly immigrants. There were 7 Muslim families from Lebanon.
And they used to pray in each other's homes until they finally got enough money to build the mosque on, you know, right here in the city of Quincy.
In 1982, the imam came from Lebanon. His wife Hind remembers the day they arrived at the mosque in Quincy. Among the greeting party was a black woman. She had never seen a black woman.
I said, this is the time I really get to practice what I did learn when I was little. You know, when we back home, they teach us Islam as all colors. You have no distinguishing between a black or white, between Arab or non-over Arab, or non-Arab over an Arab, all equal in the sight of God.
She wasn't sure what to do.
So that woman came quick and hugged me really, and I felt so good about it, and I did hug her back, and I said, this is it, I did experience that feeling that me and her, something in common, which is more than the skin, which we are different.
Suni Goodman had a similar experience.
Back home in Thailand, I never really have that because we're all Chinese Muslim, and very few that Indian, and they're in the southern part, so we haven't really get in touch with those. But here is really big varieties of, you know, and that's really
Islam in America.
Right.
You know, it's very ironic because in a lot of so-called Muslim countries, you really don't know the real beauty of Islam as you do here in North America, whether it's Canada or the U.S.
Muslims from all over New England, and originally from countries all over the world, made their way to Quincy to celebrate Eid al-Fitr. That's the holiday that celebrates the end of Ramadan. It comes at different times each year because Islam operates on a lunar calendar. But it always means the same thing. The fast is over.
Does it feel funny to be able to eat during the day?
It's funny, you get hungry quick.
How do you mean?
Well, you fast and you don't think about food, but now, as soon as you wake up, you want something. Some sweet, some coffee, something. انت بخير تعي يا هبه يلا we finish the lesson, let's say عيد مبارك. Come on do this عيد مبارك كل عيد وانت بخير wish you happy Eid.
For Muslims, Eid al-Fitr is a combination of Easter, Christmas, and Thanksgiving. It's a time to dress up, exchange cards, and eat well.
كل عيد وانت بخير تعطيني وقت.
On a deeper level, it's also a time to teach the children that the season of denial enhances appreciation for the bounty of life.
Okay. روحي بقى
جمعة روعة لأن في نتائج عاملينها يوم
A lot of people talk about the trip of a lifetime. Ibrahim Abdullah is making his. He arrived at JFK Airport in New York 5 hours early for the flight that will begin his journey to Mecca in Saudi Arabia. He's making the pilgrimage known as the Hajj.
The Hajj is the fifth pillar of Islam. It is obligatory for any Muslim of a reasonable age, male or female, to do the Hajj if he is or her mentally able, physically, and financially as well. So then, in this case, this fifth pillar has to be done, and you gotta go to the Hajj, which is Mecca.
Abdullah was born in Egypt. He's built a successful career in this country as a computer analyst.
Yes, sir.
His specialty is Arabized software, computer programs that can talk to each other in Arabic and in English.
Okay.
From his office in Weymouth, a suburb of Boston, he speaks every day to the Middle East, phone in one hand and prayer beads in the other.
This is a sibha. It is just like the rosary in the Christian religion. And what I use it for really is just to praise God. And after prayers, always praise God. Allahu Akbar, God great, 33 times. And Alhamdulillah, thanks to God, 33 times.
Abdullah travels to the Middle East often. He's been to Mecca before, but never until now has he made the Hajj, which takes place in the 12th month of the Islamic lunar calendar.
This is a picture of the Kaaba and the people in prayers around the Kaaba.
The Kaaba is the central shrine of Islam. Muslims believe it was originally built by the Prophet Abraham as the first house of worship for the one God. To see it is the pilgrim's dream.
We start from this point. You can touch it, or some people even kiss it.
But he says it's a mistake to say Muslims worship the Black Rock.
You know, for example, I remember when the Pope came to the United States first time, and he went down from the plane and kissed the ground. That's a symbol of love. It doesn't mean that he worshipped the ground or... Okay, so that's exactly the same feeling.
Symbolically, all the men on the Hajj wear the same clothing.
But, it's 2 towels. One to go around. Of course, you don't have clothes on, yeah. Other than that. And it will be held here by a safety pin. And the other one will go on the right shoulder, down under the arm, and another safety pin. That's what you live. And it's just like a preparation for the day of judgment.
And would the King Fahad have on the same thing as that?
Yeah, King Fahad will have that. And A poor man who doesn't have nothing will have the same thing and will stay shoulder to shoulder, and because they are equal in front of God.
Muslims have made the pilgrimage to Mecca every year since the Prophet Muhammad himself started the practice in the 7th century. For years, pilgrims numbered in the thousands or tens of thousands. In this age of 747s, they come by the millions.
Mecca has such an impact. Even when I made Hajj, it's like a panoramic view because you see all kinds of people, black, brown, red, and yellow, and they come into one service. And I think that impact is just like a Christian going to Jerusalem or a Christian going to Rome. I think those experiences have a deep religious impact.
Shakir Mahmoud is the leader of the Muslim community in the Dorchester section of Boston. He remembers the impact of the Hajj on his friend Malcolm X. For years, Malcolm had preached the Nation of Islam belief that the white man is the devil. But he had begun to question that view, and then he went to Mecca.
And saw that there were white Muslims, and white Muslims with blue eyes. And so he had to, I guess he had to reassess himself, and he had to reevaluate himself, and I think he saw the greatness of the Orthodox Islam. And so when Malcolm went to Mecca, it turned him around. And so he had to come back here to America and undo what he had done.
Malcolm X was assassinated less than a year after he returned. But in the years since his death in 1965, many black American Muslims have made the same spiritual journey that Malcolm did. They have rejected the racist claims of the Nation of Islam and have embraced the universal message of mainstream Islam. The old Nation of Islam temple in Dorchester, like most other black Muslim temples around the country, has become an Orthodox Muslim mosque. Islam is changing the American landscape. This is the Islamic center of Greater Toledo. It rises out of a cornfield near the interstate in Perrysburg, Ohio. It takes a lot of travelers by surprise. During construction, Imam Abdul Khattab used to listen to a CB radio to hear what truckers were saying about it.
And you see one is talking to a trucker friend and saying, John, what is that building there is all about? And he says to him, what it will be? Must be another Mexican restaurant.
There are many Pakistanis and other Asians who belong to the Islamic Center of Greater Toledo. Here, women sit side by side with men rather than behind. But the basics, the 5 pillars of Islam, are the same here as at every mosque in the world. Today is Eid al-Adha, the day that marks the high point of the Hajj. Those who have not made the pilgrimage yet talk about their longing to go. And those who have been remember its impact on their lives. Amina Ahmad.
But once you go there and face the Kaaba, the house of God, it is overwhelming. It really transforms your feelings, and you suddenly lose contact with the rest of the world around you. You forget as if there's an outer world out there. You just completely become absorbed in the experience of the Hajj.
Even though there are a million other people there with you?
There are a million other. It seems as if there's no outer world.
There was a time when tales of people going to the Hajj were as exotic as the stories in the Arabian Nights.